The first topic you should be able to see on the screen now. Darcy, could you nod if you can see the title? Thank you very much. Re-entry to ringing music. This one, I think, is going to be very apropos for a lot of the things that everybody talked about. Some of it may be really obvious. Maybe there's a nugget in here or two that are going to help you. Basically, what I did was I went through and was thinking about, if I don't have 11 ringers, if I have 9 ringers, what kind of options might I think of doing or using? And then 8 ringers, 7 ringers, 5 ringers, 4 ringers. So that's kind of what I did. So um, there may be ideas already that you're using. There may be ideas that you're not currently using. I should give a little bit of background for why this was passionate for me to do. Um, uh, I've been ringing forever. Most of you know me. A few of you don't. I just ended my term on the Area 7 board the 1st of October, so I'm fresh out of the gate from that, and couldn't just walk away. Had to jump right back in with this. But kind of like Holly, I started ringing or directing. I directed a choir that my husband and I had moved to a new congregation. They didn't have any bells. I rang a couple solos. They got all excited, wanted a bell choir, and I kept saying no. It's a congregation of of right about 120 people that register on a regular or worship on a regular basis. And I said, it's not going to be sustainable for having a choir. And everybody in that congregation, because it is small, they're pretty much all overcommitted. They're spending, many hours a week at church with choir and board meetings and so on and so forth. So I thought adding bells is just going to be too much. But they kept begging, so I finally relented. This was about 7 years ago, and said, okay, I'm going to do a boot camp on Saturday. If you want to come and spend the day with me and learn to ring bells, I'm happy to teach you. And on Sunday, we're going to ring. So I went in with the total intention of taking them from zero to ring, never having touched a bell, in less than 24 hours, putting them in front of a congregation. And we did it. And we've had 22 people go through boot camp in this little tiny congregation. We've lost several of them from moving and aging out and a number of variety of things, but so we've flexed a lot. But they also recognize that I was traveling and working full time. Many of them were working a lot of hours at church, and they didn't really want to spend a ton more time during the week at church. So we decided that learning a piece on Saturday and playing on Sunday worked really well for us. So we've never done, in the 7 years I've been directing, we've never done weekly rehearsals. It's always been a 2-hour rehearsal on Sunday, ring on or Saturday, ring on Sunday. And so I have them sign up in advance. Who's available to ring? I may have 5 ringers. I may have 16 ringers. Uh, that's kind of, I float a lot between those numbers. So I've had to learn to adjust based on having a different choir every single month. And we also ring year round because some people take off the winter, some people take off the summer, some people, whatever. So it works out that we decided to keep ringing all year round. So we never have that getting restarted because they're always restarting. It's never the same choir twice. So I feel sort of, to some degree, I feel like an expert in this area. I've been kind of doing the COVID thing for 7 years. So hopefully that will help you. I can help you traverse that ground as well. Let's see if I can get my mouse working. Okay, that's not going to work. Well, come on. I'm going to try this restart again from beginning. There we go. Okay, so first of all, I feel somewhat obligated to share the HMA requirements. You've probably all seen this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it does present new challenges for us as directors and ringers. First of all, plan music that does not require sharing bells, chimes, or music. Standing or being 6 feet apart, whether you're using tables or stands. Using sheet covers that can be easily laundered. Wear gloves at all times. and wear masks. And those sheet covers, gloves, and masks should be washed after every use. They're suggesting that you do a temperature check at the door. So when your ringers show up to ring, that you do a temperature check for them. I encourage them to sanitize their hands and have hand sanitizer available for them, and then wipe down the handles and any mallets or anything like that that you might be using the equipment. You don't need to wipe down the castings of the bells, uh, but but you should at least do the handles of the bells and any mallets, singing sticks, all that kind of stuff. So those are the HMA recommendations. The other thing I want to share with you, if you have not seen this, and by the way, all these things are available for you on the page that we sent out, so you have access to the PowerPoint. And I did it without all the colored backgrounds, so you can print it more easily. So it won't look hopefully as pretty there, but it will be practical for you to be able to print it if you want to. And it's in PDF, so all the links should work for you as well, so you can use those links. So hopefully that'll work for you. Karen Laughlin, Carlisle, and Carol Shields got together and put together their COVID list of music, and that's available on a Google Drive. You can see the link there. And basically, they looked at music that requires no bell changes and that you can use a table or stand to perform it. And all levels of music, they went through a lot. So it's a pretty comprehensive list. So that can be really helpful for you if you just want to pull that list and compare it to your library to help you more quickly find music that might be approachable during COVID. That can be a really helpful tool, or ideas of music that you might want to purchase. So they've done a lot of the heavy lifting there to evaluate that music, and it's a pretty comprehensive list. So I think one of the things that we're all facing, and some of you mentioned, is what happens when ringers decide not to come back to the table, or perhaps they can come, this week but not next week, or this month or not next month, whatever the case is. So how do we deal with that flexibility? So as I said, this is kind of about how to handle from 9 ringers down to solo. How do we do some of those things? So 9 ringers, let's just start from there and work our way down. There are a couple of different series in 18 bell music. So there's an 18 bell Easter, 18 bell Christmas, some other 18 bell music. I've used that. It's great. If you have 9 ringers, it's perfect for that. You've got 1 bell in each hand and off they go. And it's beautiful music. So that can be a quick and easy way to accomplish 9 ringers. 2 to 3 octave music is easy. You've got all the ringers you need to accomplish 2 to 3 octave music with a variety of different ways that you can accomplish that. So I'm going to quickly go through these, but just some ideas, again, that you can take notes or whatever, but sometimes we don't always think about the different ways that we might be able to approach something like 2 to 3 octave music. One of the biggest things that I can suggest is that it's going to be really powerful if you have a ringer or two who know how to do 4-in-hand. That gives you a lot of flexibility in different approaches that you can take. Not that you have to have somebody that can do 4-in-hand, but it's going to be helpful for you. If you do not have that skill in your choir and you would like to learn 4-in-hand, if you haven't got resources to do that, let us know. That's something that I can teach. We've got a number of people in Area 7 that can teach 4-in-hand. For those of you who might have attended the Bells of the Lake event a couple weeks ago, they had a session on 4-in-hand as well. And that's a skill that can really advance a choir and give you flexibility as a director for assigning parts. So 2 octave music. If you have, we start with 7 ringers, so there's 7 ringers in the corps. So we've got those parts assigned out, and then you have your optional piece, and you've got the G6 hanging out up there at the top of the treble staff, kind of on its own. So what are the kinds of things that we can do to accommodate the additional 2 ringers, or how can we use 2 more ringers above 7? So the first thing is pretty easily we can have them if you don't have any four in hand scales, assign them to the top half of that optional octave with the G, A for one ringer and the B flat C, in this case B flat C. I'm sorry, I just picked a piece of music and grabbed the bells used chart that had at least one bell in each of the lines and spaces. So fill in the blanks. If you had an A flat in this particular piece, that would be included for that ringer as well. But I just picked something simple. But so they would cover the one ringer would have G and A, and the other ringer would have B flat C. So that's one option if you don't have four in hand ringers. If you have experienced four in hand ringer and maybe one who's learning a little bit more about four in hand, I would probably I would split them with 3 and 3 so that one person would have the E's, F's, and G's, and another would have the A's, B's, and C's. So they would both have 3 bells instead of 4 to help get them more comfortable with four in hand. So as they're learning, this might be an option of a way to split them to help them learning four in hand where they just start with 3 bells in the four in hand positions. And it goes without saying as well, one of the things that I didn't put in here, but if you have, you know, a piece, look at your music obviously and do score study. If this is a piece that only has a couple of C7s, you might be able to move that someplace else, and so you'd only need one ringer who has some four in hand skills. So that's another option you can do. If you have a lot of four in hand skills, 2 strong four in hand ringers, I would put them on the top 8 bells. So you'd have one ringer doing the C's, D's, E's, and F's, 6s, and then have another one do the G6, A6, B6, C7. So they could four in hand that, and that would free up a couple of people that could then look at the optional bells at the bottom of in the bass clef. So that's another way to look at doing 9 ringers. Again, four in hand skills can be really powerful to give you additional options. Any questions about 9 or ideas about 9 bell ringers? Trying to remember if you muted you so you cannot unmute yourself or you can unmute yourself. Hang on, let me just check that.
I can unmute myself.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Jennifer, for checking. All right. So moving on to 8 ringers. So first of all, one of the things you can do pretty easily is double a quartet in octaves. So you can either do all bells or you can do a bell and chime combination if they're overlapping in the octaves. You might need to do a bell and chime combination, or it could be just interesting to have a piece. So I have a boatload of the Kimball quartet music. It's something that I use a lot. If I had a full choir and then I had 16 people that could ring that day, I may have the 4 extra people or whatever do a quartet as a prelude or something. So I bought a ton of quartet music. There's a James Kimball, I think it's James, but the Kimball anyway, starts with a K, Kimball. There's a ton of quartet music specific to Christmas as well as general. There's about 14 different packets, and it's reproducible. It's pretty easy, and it for someone who's not doesn't have a ton of music theory background, it's pretty easy to figure out where you can do repeats or that kind of thing to add verses to it because they're all pretty short. But there are a lot of common hymns in the Kimball series. So one of the things that I've done with 8 ringers is I've doubled that quartet music. And another thing that can be really useful for any choir that is using smaller numbers of ringers is to have the capability or the flexibility to have chimes and bells. This can be really helpful for pretty much anything when we start getting into smaller numbers because you can quickly double things. So taking a quartet and doubling it with a chime and a bell, not having to have them change from bells to chimes and back again, but be able to just have this group play this verse, this group play, you know, bells play first verse, chimes play second verse, both play third verse, voila, we're done. So it can be a really easy way to make it sound more complicated than it is and give some texture to the music by combining bells and chimes. So I've done that. I've doubled a quartet in octaves, and it's pretty easy to make that happen. So 2 to 3 octave music. Again, we start with our basic 7 ringers in the core of that, and then we start flexing for 8 ringers. If you have a very inexperienced ringer, maybe it's one of those choir people that you're trying to entice into bells, and you want them just to focus on one thing, learning how to ring and play the G6. That's all they need to do. So that can be an easy way to, or someone who doesn't have a lot of music skills. They haven't learned to read music very well. If they can just focus on that G6, oftentimes it doesn't play a lot even in these pieces. So it can be an easy way to introduce someone to bells and have them be effective and successful. The hardest thing about being the G6 player is that you oftentimes don't play a lot, and so you have to be able to count the in-between times and keep track of where you are and not fall asleep or get distracted. So you miss that 1 or 2 times that you get to ring. But that's a really super easy way to introduce someone to ringing, is to add them in that 8-6 position, G6 position, excuse me. Again, 4-in-hand, if you have a 4-in-hand ringer, adding them on those optional top octave is a super easy way to manage 8 bells. We'd leave the optional bass clef out, and we've got our 8 bells covered, 8 ringers covered. Again, having some 4-in-hand skills, we may split 3 and 3, the E, F, and G, and the A, B, and C in the top octave to give us our 8 ringers. I just counted 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, 8. Okay, I'm good. So that's another way to split it. Or you could take the optional, depending on what the bass clef is. If it's not overly busy, where they can table ring from the table, the bass bells, and have some skills maybe of weaving or that kind of thing, they may be able to manage those bells in the bass clef and have one ringer that has some 4-in-hand skills manage the E, F, and G bells in the sixth octave. So those are some ideas for 8 bells, 8 ringers. 7 bells. We've already been seeing that the 2-octave music has 15 primary bells, and oftentimes someone can handle that G6. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the G6 often has limited ringing in that music, and so it might be a good place for them to just be able to pick up that G6 and balance it with the E and F. Or maybe it goes down to the G5 position and they Shelley ring that G6. There's ways that you can handle that G6 to accomplish the standard 2-octave music. So depending on how much the G6 is played, it might work to add it to another or less busy part. So that's what I just mentioned. Or it could be that your 4-in-hand ringer handles that E, F, and G in the 6th octave. So that's what I look for 7 ringers. It becomes a puzzle, right? 6 ringers is optimal. It's probably the easiest one to do because there's so much music out there now in the 12-bell range that it's fantastic. And there's a lot of good quality music. In the next session, we're going to be looking at one of the Jason Krug pieces and dissecting that for the ringers. And I've really been pleased with the All Praise to Thee series from Jason Krug. I've done a lot of 12-bell music. Some of it sounds like it's 12-bell music. I feel like the Krug was the first one that really didn't feel like it was 12 bell music. But anything in the 12 bell series is perfect for your 6 ringers. They can socially distance. They just have their 2 bells. They're not sharing anything. Oftentimes when my ringers are doing 12 bell music, 6 ringers like this, I put them on stands and don't get out all the tables and every foam and everything else anyway. So, so we've already been doing this pre-COVID as well. There are some other series that I am not as familiar with, but are available. I've looked at them, but I have not purchased any of it. The Ring with Six series is a sextet music, so that is available, and you can search for that on the music selection, music vendors to look for the 6 series. But again, I'm not as familiar with that as the 12 bell series. The other thing I have toyed with is breaking out 4-in-hand quartet music to 2 bells per person. So I just did the math. That's not right. Hang on. Yeah, here. Oh, no, that's not right. 12 bells, 4-in-hand. 4 times 4 is 16. Divided by 6 does not make 4. How did we do that? So breaking out, so a couple people still doing 4-in-hand and splitting out a 4-in-hand into two parts. You can break that up to make that work for them. Yeah. So 4 ringers do 2 bells each, and 2 ringers keep their 4-in-hand positions. Something like that. Now I forgot what I did this math before. Anyway, if you have 4-in-hand quartet music, I happened to buy some of it because I thought it would be a really cool thing to do if I could get, some friends doing 4-in-hand. And then I had like 2. We can never get to a quartet. I've only used it as 4-in-hand quartet music once, but I have used it when I've had smaller numbers of ringers to be able to accomplish that. So this is another way for 6 ringers to use the 2-octave music, is to have 2 4-in-hand ringers ringing the A5 through G6, accomplishing that. So that one ringer would have the A, B, C, D, and the second ringer would have E, F, and G. So you could break it down that way to accomplish 2-octave music for 6 ringers. Five ringers. Kathy, I apologize because I had not yet put your music on here when I was doing this week. I neglected that, so I apologize for that. But 5 ringers or less, there's more and more collections along these lines. And so the 5 ringers, the 5 or less series specifically, has music in it in the collection, has 1 or 2 pieces for 5 ringers, 1 or 2 pieces for trios, 1 or 2 pieces for quartets. So in that booklet, that collection, it gives you a couple different options in that. The 12 bell series will work if you have somebody who can do 4-in-hand. So if it was a 12 bell in F, they would be able to do G6 to G7. So that possibility is there for you to leverage that 12 bell music for 5 ringers. And you can see there's a theme here. 4-in-hand comes into play a lot to give you that flexibility. Again, it's a skill that can be really helpful. So that would look something like this. If you were doing 12 bell music, this is the example in F, where it starts on F5 and goes up to C7. Your 5th ringer would have G6, A6, B6, and C6. Another option for 5 ringers in the 12 bell series. If you have less experienced or 2 ringers who have some 4-in-hand experience, then you can split it 3 bells and 3 bells, doing the E, F, and G for the 4th position and A, B, and C for the 5th position. So 1 to 4 ringers, in addition to the music that Kathy suggested and the music that's in that 5 bell series or 5 ringer series, there's a ton of solo, duet, and trio music available for both the table and the tree. I've used all of it at different times. There's a Porta 4 series for quartets. There's the 4-ringer handbell collections. I mentioned the Kimball series of quartets. The Hand in Glove music for handbell ensemble is another series that's out there. The Ring Along series of 8 bells. These are designed to be taken on the go. They're designed to be able to walk into a nursing home or what have you and not have to have any bell changes, etc. So super easy music. So that Ring Along series is available. I'm sure some of you have had experience with that. And then the 5 or less with trios, quartets, and 5-ringer collections I described previously gives you some options for that quartet music and trio music. And of course, we can leverage the 12 bell if you have your advanced ringers with 2 or 3 ringers playing 4-in-hand. So most of the 12 bell music has that outlined in the front cover of the 12 bell series. It will describe how they would recommend splitting it up for 2 or 3 ringers playing 4-in-hand. And then you get your 4-in-hand quartet or trio anyway. Doing 12 bell music can be pretty cool. So other possibilities, multiple bell techniques, we've mentioned already 4-in-hand. If you have someone who's skilled at 6-in-hand, that can also be helpful to cover some bells. I don't find 6-in-hand to be that easy for an extended period of time. So so you have to work with that, but I'd focus on 4-in-hand to start with. You can also move upper bells into Shelley positions an octave lower. So I mentioned that with the G6 in the 2-octave music, moving the G6 down to the G5 position so that they can play it in Shelley mode octaves. That can be a way to cover bells or to share those bells with the number of ringers you have. If you have something that's played less frequently, you can move it to someone who doesn't have anything active at that point in time. So I've seen things where, for example, the C7 is only played a few times. Maybe I can't remember what piece it was recently, but I was looking at, and like the C7 was on the last chord, and that was the only place it was in the entire piece. And I'm like, well, you can't really just have somebody assigned to the C7 and they get to play on the last note and that's it. So moving it to someone who isn't playing on the last chord would be a way to accomplish that. So you can move those bells to some place where they're not. And again, this all requires some score study. The last one that I want to mention, most of you know I'm very passionate about bell trees, so that's always an option that I look at. It's not always pragmatic, but I know Christina's on the call. She's done some things like that where she's covered the melody on bell tree for a piece that she was playing with her kids a couple years ago at camp. I know Deb Model has done that for a piece that she's played recently. She just learned bell trees this year, and she was all excited because they had a piece and they didn't have coverage for some of the bells, and she looked at it and they were all malleted, and she was like, well, if they're all malleted, why can't I just put them on a bell tree? So she did, and it worked, and she was all happy. So so it doesn't work for everything, but if you have the capability, it may work to apply bell tree to that. Questions, comments, or ideas? That went way faster than I thought it would. I'm going to unmute you all and see if anybody wants to share.
Karen, I was wondering,
Sure.
with the trios and the duets, do they involve sharing bells with one another?
It depends on what you're looking at. So, as an example, the what's the 5 bell series called that you do share bells on? 5x5s. 5x5s, for example, are designed to share bells, but there's a lot of duets and quartets and so forth that do not require sharing bells.
Okay.
So you're just gonna have to kind of look at it and see. But yeah, for example, there's some duet bell tree pieces that don't require that you share. You each have your own tree, so you can go to different, you can social distance with that. So yeah, good question, Darcy, but I think it just depends. For example, the Kimball series quartet music does not require sharing of bells. There may be bell changes in it, but not sharing of bells.
Okay.
The other option, which I'm able to have at the moment, is 5 to 6 of my ringers are in the same family, live in the same house. So they don't have to socially distance and they can share bells. And then we have our pastor and his wife both ring in my choir. And so they have 2 tables put together. You know what I mean? So if you look at the music, you might be able to share bells between people who actually live together if you have that fortunate situation in your choir.
Good point. Other thoughts?
One of the books that I have it has percussion. I can't remember exactly, but it's one of the 12 bell plus one with percussion. And that one I'm using with my kids because that adds another opportunity. If an extra shows up, I can give him a tambourine.
Perfect.
or whatever. So I like that one too, because that one is a little more flexible between 6 and 8 ringers.
Yeah.
Depending on who shows up and what they can get. So.
And if somebody else shows up, you just add more percussion, right?
Right.
Add more cowbell. Whose is that? Do you know? Do you remember, Christina?
I'll look it up real quick.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one, but that's a good idea too. And the other option is to look at other music as well. Instrumentation, music that has instrumentation associated with it that you can put another instrument on if you have those skills in your choir.
It's Ring with 6 Percussion by Martha Lynn Thompson.
And I would just say that, I've got tons of 2-octave music that has percussion parts with it, So there's 7 ringers there. You get one extra one that shows up and there you go.
Good option. I'm making notes. Anybody else have ideas? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? Does everybody pretty much have at least one ringer who can 4 in hand, or is that a skill that's lacking?
I just
Christina.
have one ringer right now that can do that.
One is better than none. Christina has none.
Right.
She's jealous. I can tell.
I used to have one really good 4 in hand ringer. She has left. She got married, moved to Milwaukee. But her siblings are in my choir, and that happens to be the church that just bought the bells, and the bells are sitting in their house. So like last Thursday, I said, you two need to go look up a YouTube video. I'll find you one on how to do 4 in hand, because I know they could do it. There's no doubt in my mind they could do it. But I got to get them to practice. It's one of those things you just have to sit down and practice it.
Yep. If they need a coach, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Happy to volunteer, Jennifer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I think if I can find a YouTube video for them, that this whole family was homeschooled, They're
Oh, yeah.
really smart, and they usually can figure things out on their own. And they've played. I had a quartet of that family, 4 of them, together one year that we played a bunch of music, and so they're very adept at knowing what bells they need and where they're at. They just didn't do the 4-in-hand stuff yet.
Yeah.
Their sister always did that. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if their sister did it, they know they have a teacher.
yes, they do.
Even though she's moved, she can
right,
still.
she could Zoom with them and
Yeah.
figure it out.
Awesome. Yeah, it is a skill. I remember when I learned 4-in-hand, and it was kind of scary because it was like, here, 4 bells, go, and I was like, what? And oh, and by the way, we need you to ring it on this piece next Sunday. What? Not the approach that I've taken with my ringers. I have broken them in easily by giving them some challenges. I would strongly recommend for anyone that when you're starting out with new 4-in-handers, find a nice hymn that you can add a pentatonic scale to it and have them 4-in-hand random ring on a verse or two, and tell them to focus on what bell, like purposely what bell they're trying to ring, so that they're thinking about what their hands are doing. But then it's an easy way for them to become successful without having to get it right the first time on the right note in that piece on Sunday morning in front of everyone. So I always start them with random ringing. Then I give them an ostinato pattern and say, here's the pattern. Think about what bells you're ringing. Be purposeful about it, but ring the 3rd verse on this one. And then we'll work you over to playing the music and making sure that the right bell rings at the right time. So just some tips for 4-in-hand beginners. Other thoughts?
I was just going to say, I think in general, some of my ringers that have showed up every month are not necessarily my strongest ringers, but they're getting, just amazing skills. A lot of months we're only able to practice 2 or 3 times before we're ready to ring on Sunday and record. And they're able to kind of sight read the music and just put it together pretty quick. So I have told them, like, you guys are getting some really good skills that we didn't have strong before.
Mm-hmm. They've had to step up. That's awesome, Holly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. My choir admitted to me Thursday night that they would have had a harder time doing this had I not made them move positions every song. I don't have a bass bell ringer.
yeah.
I don't have a treble. You play what I put in front of you for this song.
Yeah. I was fortunate that when I started the choir at Holy Cross, because they had no bell background, they had no concept of my bells. And yeah, they change. They don't have a position. They never have. Mm-hmm. And so when people say that, they all look at me like, what does that mean? And I'm like, never mind.
Yeah, they don't need to know about it.
Those people are just silly. They bought those bells for the church, so that they're their bells. That's all you need to know. Yeah, that is the elephant in the room, though. If your ringers are stuck on, I always play F and G5, you have a bigger battle to cover before you can even start to think about some of these other options. So it makes it tougher. And just like Christina said, having to, her bass ringers won't play up. It makes it tougher. Kathy.
Yeah, and sadly, that is the norm.
It is, unfortunately.
And it really, and I would say, I've been all over the country doing stuff, and 9 choirs out of 10 have people who they can't move, because the ringers themselves have such a wall built up, around themselves and their notes,
Yep.
and it's lasted for years.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And this is where they are. So, asking someone to change is like asking them to move out of their house tonight.
No, it's asking them like moving pews on Sunday.
Yes.
Not within their scope to even do that.
Yeah.
So really, I think, have to be awfully careful, with a lot of folks. And like I said, I think it's about 9 choirs out of 10 where you have that.
When I first made them do it, I had a rule. You could stay in the same spot if you were older than I was. And only 2 people qualified for it. But anybody younger than me has to move.
Yeah, like I said, my choir doesn't know that, so they never have. But it's interesting. I have a cousin down in Arizona, and I was watching their church service because she was playing 2 weeks ago. Their bell choir was playing, and she's just started ringing. And I watched the choir, and I was like, "Oh, she's got G5, A5. Ooh,
Really?
obviously their director doesn't know the golden rule of spaces and lines." Yeah, their whole choir is off once, and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting," but they don't know the difference. But she said, "I play, G5, A5." She has her bells, and I was like, "Oh yeah, not good." I would say though that the only thing that I asked my choir director when I was in my former choir was that on a given Sunday not to have me play 2 positions side by side for 2 different pieces.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's really hard to shift one
Right.
position either direction. I'd rather move 5 positions than to move just one.
Correct. I
Or
agree.
keep positions the same for that Sunday and move me for another Sunday. That's fine. But that was really hard. I think that was the only thing that was hard about it was I can't move one position. So, okay. Awesome. Any other questions or comments or ideas? Was this helpful for anybody? Some nuggets someplace? I'm getting some
Yes.
nods. Okay, good. Awesome. Like I said, this is my world. I do a lot of score study, which is what the next topic is. I spend a lot of time in score study because I'm constantly thinking about who can ring this, how can I cover these bells, can I accomplish it with the level of ringers that I have, not just to your point of not all my great ringers show up every Sunday or every rehearsal. I have to think about which ones. Do I have a 4-in-hand ringer? I may have a 4-in-hand ringer in my choir, but they may not be showing up for this rehearsal. So then what do I do? So yeah, all those things come into play with it. Good points. Cool.
I think another reason why it's good to move people around in your choir is that sometimes if you have a rehearsal and a certain person is not in there for playing a certain parts, somebody else can jump right in because they know they don't, if they just ring that 1 or 2 bells, they can't jump up and fill a position when somebody's gone. That happened to me quite a few times when I never had a full bell choir. There was always somebody that could step up and play those extra bells.